Journal of High Commander Velik, 7th cycle of the Galactic Exploration Corps. Remember the day we discovered them? Small, soft creatures on a blue world, circling an unremarkable yellow star. How could we have known? The galaxy has taught us many lessons over our 1,000 cycles of exploration, but none so profound as the one taught by these humans. I am Velik, High Commander of the Euryxian Galactic Exploration Corps. Our species has conquered a quarter of the known galaxy, not through mindless aggression, but through calculated dominance and a superior warrior culture refined over 10,000 cycles. We are born to battle, bred for conquest, evolved for victory. Our exoskeletons can withstand extreme temperatures and pressures. Our 4 arms grant us combat advantages unmatched by most bipedal species. Our warriors train from hatching, and our society is structured around military achievement. So when we discovered Earth and its inhabitants in the Sol system, our initial scans indicated nothing exceptional. The humans were physically unimpressive, no natural armor, limited strength, poor sensory capabilities, and embarrassingly fragile bodies. They were not the largest, strongest, fastest, or most durable species we had encountered. They were, by all objective measures, utterly unremarkable. Or so we thought. The council chambers hummed with the subtle vibrations of anticipation as I delivered my preliminary report. The 7 members of the High Command sat in their ceremonial positions, their exoskeletons polished to a mirror shine, carapace markings, declaring their illustrious battle histories. High Commander Velik, Sub-Commander Zarix interrupted, his mandibles clicking impatiently. Your survey team spent a full cycle studying this Earth, yet you bring us reports of soft, weak creatures. Why waste council resources? Are they technologically superior? I clicked my mandibles in the negative gesture. No, Sub-Commander. Their technology is primitive by our standards. They have rudimentary space travel, but have barely left their own planet's orbit. Do they possess unique biological weapons, telepathic abilities, some natural advantage we could harness? This from Commander Thex, always looking for biological advantages to incorporate into our forces. No, I admitted. By most standards, they are average. The chamber filled with dismissive clicking. Then why? Demanded High Counselor Krex, rising to his full intimidating height. Have you requested a full invasion assessment? We have targets with far greater strategic value awaiting our attention. I activated the holo display. Because of this, the display showed humans engaged in various activities, fighting with primitive weapons, scaling sheer cliff faces without equipment, diving to crushing ocean depths, running what appeared to be arbitrary long distances, and surviving in environments from freezing tundra to scorching deserts. I don't understand, said Zarix. These are not impressive feats. Respectfully, Sub-Commander, they are when you consider these are not their warriors, these are their civilians, their hobbyists, their recreational activities. The chamber fell silent. Humans, I continued, are not the strongest, fastest, or most durable species we've encountered, but they may be the most adaptable and determined species in the galaxy, and that makes them dangerous in ways we've never encountered before. First Directive Officer Melex, my most trusted subordinate, disagreed with my assessment. As we prepared for our covert observational mission to Earth, she made her position clear. Commander, she said, her voice carrying the formal tone of disagreement as we boarded our stealth vessel, I've reviewed your preliminary findings and must register my professional dissent. These humans show no exceptional physical characteristics. Their planetary military forces are fractured and primitive. They spend more time fighting each other than preparing for external threats. I adjusted my perception membranes, focusing on her carapace patterns, signs of a loyal officer, but one who hadn't witnessed what our deep reconnaissance had shown. Melex, What is the primary attribute of a Xyrexian warrior? Strength, she answered without hesitation, as any proper Xyrexian would. And after that, discipline, strategy, courage in battle. I nodded, all proper answers from our military doctrine. Now let me ask you this, what species would continue fighting after losing a limb? Her mandibles clicked in confusion. None, Commander. That would be irrational. What species would willingly endure pain and suffering, not for survival, but for entertainment? Entertainment. I don't understand. Neither do I admitted. And that is precisely why we must observe them more closely. Our first direct observation post was established in a region the humans called Afghanistan. We chose it for its remote location and ongoing conflict, allowing us to observe human combat behaviors without detection. Melex and I, along with a small team of elite observers, watched from our camouflaged position as a group of human soldiers moved through a mountain pass. They had been walking for 3 days with minimal rest, carrying equipment, nearly half their body weight, at an altitude where oxygen was thin. This is unexpected, Melex admitted. They've been awake for approximately 72 of their hours. Their biological readings indicate extreme fatigue, dehydration, and oxygen deprivation. Yet they continue. And note their communication patterns, I added. They are joking, making light of their suffering. As we watched, the humans encountered hostile forces. What followed was not the organized, disciplined combat of Xyrexian forces. It was chaotic, improvised, and surprisingly effective. One human was struck by projectile weapons in the lower limb. Instead of retreating or accepting defeat as any rational being would, the injured human applied emergency medical treatment to himself and continued fighting. Commander, Melex's voice had lost its dismissive tone. This behavior defies biological logic. Yes, I agreed, and it's not isolated. Our global surveillance indicates similar patterns across their species. They call it pushing through, digging deep, mind over matter. They believe, against all biological evidence, that their will can overcome their physical limitations. But that's not possible, Melex insisted. And yet, they do it anyway. Over the following months we expanded our observation networks across the planet. What we found both fascinated and disturbed us. In what the humans called Brazil, we observed ritual combat they termed jiu-jitsu, where smaller, weaker humans routinely defeated larger opponents through technique and leverage. In Russia, humans deliberately immersed themselves in freezing water as a test of endurance. In Kenya, humans ran distances that would exhaust even our most elite warriors, not for survival or military purpose, but for sport. They make a game of suffering, Melex noted as we watched humans in a marathon collapse at the finish line, some requiring medical attention. They seek out discomfort, pain and exhaustion. Why? I had spent countless hours reviewing our observations, trying to understand this paradox. I believe they are continually testing their limits, deliberately pushing beyond what they think possible. It's as if they refuse to accept any boundary as fixed. We shifted our observation to what humans called special forces training. Here, their military deliberately placed recruits in situations designed to break them mentally and physically. Sleep deprivation, exposure to extreme environments, psychological pressure, all applied systematically. Many fail, I noted as we watched several humans quit the program. But those who succeed have learned something vital, that their perceived limits are largely self-imposed. This is not how warriors are trained, Melex objected. Warriors are born with strength and honed through discipline. Yes, I agreed. That is our way. But these humans, they forge their warriors through deliberate adversity. They break them down to rebuild them stronger, not physically stronger, mentally stronger. A curious approach, Melex admitted, but surely less efficient than genetic selection and battlefield culling. I wasn't so certain anymore. Our next observation target was a human military training facility they called Ranger School. Here, elite soldiers were subjected to extreme sleep deprivation, minimal food, and constant physical demands. They're allowed approximately 3 hours of sleep per night, Melex reported, and given only 65% of their optimal caloric intake. Their bodies are literally consuming themselves, and yet, they perform complex tactical operations. We watched as a group of exhausted humans successfully executed a night raid on a mock enemy position. Their movements were slow, their coordination impaired, but they adapted, communicated, and completed their mission. In our forces, I noted, such conditions would be considered a failure of logistics and planning. For them it's deliberate training methodology. To what end? Melex asked. To teach them that they can function, even succeed, when their bodies and minds are telling them to stop. To push beyond what seems possible. Later that cycle, we witnessed something even more revealing. A training exercise gone wrong. A human trainee, already exhausted beyond reasonable limits, was accidentally submerged in freezing water. By our medical calculations, the combination of prior exhaustion, hypothermia, and stress should have resulted in immediate system failure. Instead, the humans survived. Not only survived, but helped fellow trainees to safety before seeking medical attention. Commander, Melex's voice contained something I'd never heard from her before: uncertainty. I'm beginning to understand your concern. These humans don't seem to accept the biological limitations that govern other species. Precisely, I replied, and that makes them unpredictable. Over the next several months, we expanded our surveillance beyond military contexts. What we found in civilian settings was equally perplexing. We observed humans working multiple jobs, sleeping minimally, maintaining family units, and pursuing education simultaneously. We watched them recover from injuries that would permanently disable other species. We saw them survive disease, starvation, and trauma that should have been fatal. They adapt to almost any environment, I noted as we reviewed data from human settlements ranging from Arctic conditions to equatorial jungles, not through evolution, but through sheer stubborn will and improvisation. But surely there are limits, Melex insisted. Physical laws cannot be overcome by determination alone. In response, I displayed records of human free climbers ascending sheer rock faces without safety equipment, ultra-marathoners running hundreds of miles through deserts, and free divers descending to crushing depths on a single breath. Their limits appear to be negotiable, I said, and growing their capabilities seems to be a cultural obsession. We next focused our observation on what humans called disaster response. Following a catastrophic earthquake, we watched as ordinary civilians dug through rubble for days, ignoring injuries, exhaustion, and danger to rescue strangers. Note how they respond to what should be defeat, I said. When told a situation is hopeless, they often redouble their efforts. When faced with impossible odds, some of them become more determined, not less. Melex was silent for a long moment. Commander, I now see why you requested a full invasion assessment. These humans, they don't fight like warriors, they fight like something else entirely. Yes, I agreed, and I'm increasingly convinced that conquering them would not be as simple as our initial scans suggested. The full invasion assessment team arrived at our observation post 6 months after our initial discovery. Led by war strategist Krex, they were skeptical of my reports, and eager to demonstrate that humans would fall easily before our superior forces. High Commander, Krex began, his battle scars gleaming under our ship's lights. I've reviewed your observations. While fascinating, they hardly justify your recommendation to classify Earth as a Class 4 military challenge. I understand your skepticism, I replied. I shared it initially. These humans have no unified planetary defense. Their most powerful weapons are crude nuclear devices. Their bodies break easily. By all measurable standards, they are an easy conquest. I invite you to observe them directly before making your final assessment, I said carefully. Krex agreed, more from protocol than interest. We began with footage of human emergency responders dealing with a structural collapse in one of their cities. Note how they continue working despite injuries, I pointed out. This one has a broken arm. This one is suffering from smoke inhalation. Yet they continue. Krex's mandibles clicked dismissively. Irrational behavior is not military advantage, Commander. It merely makes them unpredictable, which can be countered with sufficient force. Next I showed him footage of their combat sports, boxing, wrestling, and something called mixed martial arts. They fight for entertainment, Krex asked, genuinely confused. They deliberately place themselves in combat situations, risking injury and pain, to test themselves and improve their skills, I explained. Even their recreational activities often involve discomfort, risk and endurance testing. Curious, but hardly concerning for an invasion force. I nodded to Melax, who activated our most compelling evidence, data from human historical conflicts. This is from their Second World War, I explained, as footage played of human soldiers fighting across various terrains. Note the Battle of Stalingrad. Humans fighting in temperatures cold enough to freeze their appendages, starvation conditions, surrounded, outnumbered. Conventional military doctrine would dictate surrender. Yet they fought, Krex observed. For how long? 5 months, 3 weeks and 3 days. Even Krex could not hide his surprise. Without relief, without adequate supplies. Correct, I said. And this pattern repeats throughout their history. From ancient battles like Thermopylae, to modern conflicts, like the Siege of Sarajevo, humans regularly demonstrate a capacity to endure conditions that should break them. I showed more examples: Arctic explorers surviving impossible conditions, prisoners of war enduring years of captivity and torture, civilians forming resistance movements against overwhelming odds. Most concerning, I continued, is their response to initial defeat. When conquering other species, we typically observe submission following the demonstration of our superior force. Humans, however, often become more determined after suffering losses. Krex remained silent, as we showed him the most disturbing evidence, simulations of potential invasion scenarios based on human historical responses to occupation. Our models indicate that conventional conquest would initially succeed, I explained. But unlike other species, human resistance would likely intensify rather than diminish over time. They excel at asymmetric warfare, adaptation of tactics, and psychological resilience. You're suggesting, Krex said slowly, that we could win every battle and still lose the war. I'm suggesting that winning and losing means something different to humans than they do to us. They've demonstrated throughout their history a willingness to absorb catastrophic losses and continue fighting. Krex's posture shifted, the first sign he was taking this seriously. What is your recommendation, Commander? Classify Earth as a Class 4 military challenge. Consider diplomatic approaches rather than conquest. After a long silence, Krex spoke. I'll need to verify these observations personally. Krex spent the next 3 months immersed in human study. He reviewed their military history, observed their training methods, and analyzed their conflict resolution patterns. He was particularly interested in what humans called insurgency warfare and resistance movements. When he finally called the assessment team together, his demeanor had changed noticeably. Commander Velik's observations are accurate, he began, shocking the room into silence. These humans possess qualities that make them uniquely challenging as potential adversaries. He activated the holo display, showing various human activities. They train not just for strength, but for what they call mental toughness. They deliberately subject themselves to hardship to build resilience.
Their elite warriors are selected not primarily for physical attributes, but for psychological characteristics, determination, adaptability, and what they call heart. He displayed historical battle statistics. More concerning, they learn and adapt with remarkable speed. In their World War II, tactics evolved rapidly on all sides. Strategies that worked at the beginning failed months later as countermeasures developed. He paused, his mandibles working in the expression of deep concern. But most troubling is this: humans appear to be at their most dangerous when victory seems impossible. When faced with overwhelming force, many species surrender. Humans often fight harder.
They form resistance movements. They adapt to insurgency tactics. They endure occupation with the explicit goal of exhausting the occupier's will to continue. The assessment team chittered nervously. Based on these findings, Krex concluded, I concur with Commander Velik's assessment. Earth should be classified as a Class 4 military challenge. Standard conquest protocols would likely fail. The room erupted in disbelieving clicks and hisses. No species without advanced technology had ever received such a classification. When order was restored, I spoke. War strategist Krex, do you believe humans represent a threat to the Zaraxian dominion? Krex's answer surprised everyone. Not currently. They are too focused on internal conflicts to present an external threat. However, should they unite and develop more advanced technology, they would become the most formidable adversary we have encountered. Why? Demanded Sub-Commander Zarex. They are physically inferior in every measurable way. Because, Krex said slowly, we fight until victory or defeat. Humans fight until they cannot fight anymore. And their definition of cannot is remarkably elastic. The High Council received our report with skepticism bordering on outrage. A Class 4 designation for a pre-spacefaring species with no natural armor or superior physical attributes. It was unprecedented. To settle the matter, they dispatched High Council Atreus, our most decorated military strategist, to make the final assessment. Atreus had conquered 17 systems and never miscalculated an enemy's capabilities. He arrived with an entourage of elite warriors and military analysts. His first action was to dismiss our reports entirely and begin his own investigation from first principles. These humans, he demanded, show me their most elite warriors. We presented footage of various special forces units, Navy SEALs, Spetsnaz, SAS and others. Their selection process, he asked. Primarily psychological, I explained. They deliberately create conditions of extreme stress, fatigue, cold and discomfort. Most candidates fail. To what end? To identify those with the greatest mental resilience and determination. Atreus watched footage of what humans called Hell Week, a training ordeal where prospective special forces candidates were kept awake for days, constantly wet, cold and driven to physical exhaustion. Interesting approach, he admitted. We select for physical strength and obedience to command. They select for persistence. Over the following weeks, Atreus expanded his investigation beyond military contexts. He studied human exploration, their response to natural disasters, their medical trauma treatment, and their competitive sports. They appear obsessed with exceeding limitations, he noted, both as individuals and as a species. Yes, I agreed. It seems central to their culture. Atreus was particularly fascinated by human medical case studies, individuals who survived conditions that should have been fatal, who recovered from catastrophic injuries, who endured suffering that would break the will of most sentient beings. This requires further investigation, he declared. I wish to observe a human settlement dealing with adversity. Our opportunity came with a natural disaster, a massive hurricane that struck a coastal human region. Using advanced cloaking technology, we positioned ourselves to observe the human response directly. What we witnessed changed Atreus's assessment completely. The storm destroyed infrastructure, cut power to millions of humans, and created life-threatening conditions across a wide area. By any rational calculation, the affected regions should have descended into chaos. Resources were scarce, infrastructure was compromised, survival odds were diminished. Instead, we observed something remarkable. Their organizing, Trays noted with surprise, not just their emergency services, but ordinary civilians. They're creating distribution networks for resources, establishing communications, rescuing strangers. We watched as humans formed volunteer search parties, shared limited supplies, and worked tirelessly to assist their most vulnerable. When official response systems were overwhelmed, impromptu community efforts emerged spontaneously. This defies prediction models, Trays admitted. In similar conditions, most species focus on individual or family unit survival. These humans are cooperating with non-kin at personal risk. Most striking was their persistence. Days into the disaster, with minimal rest and dwindling resources, their efforts intensified rather than diminished. "Commander," Trays said finally, "I must reassess my position. These humans display characteristics that would make them exceptionally difficult to conquer through conventional means. You support the Class 4 designation." "I do," he said, "and I further recommend against any military engagement with Earth for the foreseeable future." His next statement stunned me. "In fact, I believe we may have discovered something unprecedented, a species that would make the perfect warrior race, as allies rather than subjects." The High Council received Trays's report with grave concern. 3 separate assessment teams, all reaching the same unexpected conclusion. It was unprecedented in our conquest history. A special session was convened to determine our approach to Earth. I was summoned to present our collective findings. "High Commander Velek," began the Council leader, "your discovery presents us with a unique situation. Never before have we classified a pre-spacefaring species as a Class 4 military challenge. Explain your reasoning concisely." I activated the holographic display, showing compiled footage of human activities across multiple domains: military, civilian emergency response, extreme sports, exploration, and medical trauma survival. "Esteemed Council," I began, "humans possess 4 characteristics that in combination make them uniquely formidable, despite their physical limitations." I displayed the first dataset. 1. Exceptional adaptability. Humans can acclimate to environments ranging from Arctic to equatorial, from sea level to high altitude, from urban to wilderness. They accomplish this not through evolution, but through behavioral adaptation and technology. The second dataset appeared. 2. Psychological resilience. Humans demonstrate an unusual capacity to endure hardship, pain, and adversity without surrendering. Their historical conflicts show that conventional force calculations often fail when applied to human resistance capacity. The third dataset followed. 3. Rapid tactical innovation. When conventional approaches fail, humans quickly develop alternatives. During our observation period, we documented numerous examples of improvised solutions to problems that would have defeated less creative species. Finally, the fourth dataset. 4, and perhaps most significant, humans display a seemingly irrational persistence when facing overwhelming odds. Where most species recognize defeat and surrender to preserve resources, humans often intensify their efforts, even when objective analysis indicates certain failure. I paused, allowing the Council to process this information. Most concerning for conquest planning is the human response to occupation. Historical data indicates that occupied human populations develop resistance movements that persist for generations. The psychological cost of maintaining control grows exponentially over time, as the occupying force experiences what humans call combat fatigue, while resistance forces are continually energized by their cause. The Council chamber remained silent as I concluded my presentation. Based on these findings, I support the unanimous recommendation of all 3 assessment teams: Earth should be classified as a Class 4 military challenge, and conquest should be removed from our strategic planning. The silence that followed was finally broken by Council Leader Vrax. High Commander, your assessment indicates that these humans, despite their physical inferiority, possess qualities that would make them difficult to subjugate. But what of their potential as allies? This question surprised me. The Zaraxian Dominion had a 5000 cycle history of conquest, not alliance. High Council Atraz raised this possibility. I acknowledged. Humans display characteristics that align surprisingly well with our warrior culture: persistence, adaptation, psychological resilience. They lack our physical advantages but compensate through innovation, and what they call force multiplication, the strategic application of limited resources for maximum impact. You suggest we should partner with these creatures? Asked another counselor, mandibles clicking in disbelief. I suggest, I replied carefully, that humans represent both a unique challenge as potential adversaries and an unprecedented opportunity as potential allies. They complement our strengths and compensate for our weaknesses. Explain, demanded Vrax. The Zaraxian approach to warfare emphasizes overwhelming force, superior physical capabilities, and disciplined coordination. These have served us well against conventional opponents. Humans, however, excel at asymmetric warfare, adaptation, and psychological resilience. They find ways to achieve victory even when conventionally outmatched. I displayed tactical simulations showing hypothetical human-Zaraxian joint operations. Combined, these approaches would create a military force with unprecedented capabilities, the physical superiority and discipline of Zaraxians complemented by the adaptability and psychological resilience of humans. The council chamber filled with thoughtful clicking as the members considered this radical proposal. There is another factor to consider, I added. Our surveillance indicates that humans are advancing technologically at an exponential rate. Within a few centuries, they will likely achieve interstellar capabilities. When that happens, we would face a species that combines technological parity with these unique psychological advantages. Better to establish relations now, from a position of technological superiority, than to confront them later as equals or superiors. Council Leader Vrax rose to his full height, signaling a formal decision. High Commander Velek, your discovery and assessment are noted. The Council hereby classifies Earth as a Class 4 military challenge, the first pre-spacefaring species to receive such designation. Furthermore, we authorize you to develop a first contact protocol focused on potential alliance rather than conquest. It was an unprecedented directive in our expansionist history. The Zaraxian Dominion has conquered many worlds, Vrax continued. Perhaps it is time we learned a different approach. Preparing for first contact with humans required completely new protocols. Our standard approach to newly discovered species was simple: demonstrate overwhelming force, demand submission, incorporate useful elements into our empire. With humans, we needed something completely different. They value reciprocity, I explained to our newly formed Human Contact Division. Our analysis of their diplomatic history suggests they respond best to approaches that acknowledge mutual benefit and respect sovereignty. But we are technologically superior, objected Officer Kellex. Why not simply demonstrate our capabilities and demand their cooperation? Because, Melex answered before I could, that approach would likely trigger exactly the resistance response that makes them so formidable. They've repeatedly demonstrated in their own history that technological superiority alone does not guarantee compliance. I nodded approval at Melex's assessment. Her transformation from skeptic to advocate had been remarkable. Our goal, I continued, is to establish ourselves as potential allies, not conquerors. To do that, we must approach them in a way that aligns with their cultural values, which are, asked another officer, complex and sometimes contradictory, I admitted.
but our analysis suggests they place high value on autonomy, reciprocal benefit, and what they call respect. They respond poorly to perceived coercion or threats. We spent months developing an approach protocol based on human diplomatic precedents. The plan was to make contact with a limited number of human representatives, demonstrate our technological capabilities in non-threatening ways, and propose specific areas of mutual benefit. Commander, Melex approached me the night before our scheduled first contact. I've been reviewing our final assessment reports, and I have a concern. Speak freely. We've focused extensively on human resilience, adaptability, and persistence, qualities that make them valuable potential allies and dangerous potential adversaries. But there's another quality our analysts have identified that receives less attention in our reports, which is their capacity for trust building with unlike entities. Our research shows humans forming deep cooperative bonds with entirely different species on their planet, what they call animals. They exhibit behaviors toward these non-kin, non-like entities that suggest they can form genuine alliances across significant biological differences. I considered this. You believe this improves our chances for successful alliance? I believe, she said carefully, that humans have demonstrated a capability we lack in our evolutionary history, the ability to see unlike beings as potential partners rather than potential threats or resources. This may be their most valuable quality for our purposes. Her insight proved remarkably prescient. Our first contact protocol was implemented with a carefully selected group of human representatives, a mixture of their political leaders, military strategists, and scientific experts. We chose a remote location and approached with minimal show of force, though with substantial hidden capabilities, should they prove necessary. The humans reacted with initial fear, then intense curiosity. Their questions were numerous and varied, demonstrating an intellectual flexibility that impressed even our most skeptical officers. Most surprising was their response when we eventually acknowledged the truth that we had originally discovered Earth as a potential conquest target. "So you came to invade, but changed your minds?" asked one of their military leaders, displaying the direct communication style typical of their species. "We conducted a standard conquest assessment," I explained carefully. "The results were unexpected. Your species possesses qualities that would make conventional conquest extraordinarily difficult." Rather than responding with anger at this admission, the human smiled. "You realized we'd be too much trouble to subdue?" "Essentially, yes. We classified Earth as a Class 4 military challenge, the first pre-space-faring species to receive such designation." "I'm curious," said another human, "what exactly convinced you? We're obviously technologically behind you. Our weapons would be ineffective against your capabilities." I activated a holographic display, showing compiled footage from our observation period. Humans persisting through seemingly impossible conditions, adapting to changing circumstances, innovating solutions to overwhelming problems. "Your physical capabilities are not exceptional," I explained, "but your psychological resilience, adaptability, and persistence in the face of overwhelming odds are unprecedented in our experience." Our conquest models predicted initial victory, followed by protracted, resource-intensive occupation with high probability of eventual withdrawal. The humans exchanged glances that our cultural analysts interpreted as pride mixed with amusement. "So instead of trying to fight us," said their lead representative, "you're proposing an alliance." "We are proposing," I said carefully, "a partnership of mutual benefit. Your species possesses qualities that complement our own. Together, we would be more effective than either alone." What followed was not what any of our analysts had predicted. The humans asked to deliberate privately, which we allowed. When they returned, their approach had shifted. "Commander Velik," said their lead representative, "we appreciate your candor about your initial intentions, and your decision to pursue partnership instead. However, we have concerns about allying with a species whose default approach to new civilizations is conquest. This objection had not appeared in any of our simulation models. It was, from our perspective, irrational. We were offering technological advancement, protection, and partnership. The logical response would be acceptance. Our species, the human continued, has its own history of conquest and imperialism. We've learned through painful experience that such approaches ultimately fail. If we're to consider partnership with the Zaraxian Dominion, we would need assurances that our values would be respected and that our partnership would benefit not just our species, but others in the galaxy. It was a response so unexpected that it left our entire delegation momentarily speechless. They were not negotiating from a position of weakness, as would be logical, but from a position of moral authority. More surprising still, I found myself responding, not with dismissal, but with genuine consideration. What would such assurances entail? I asked. What followed was the most unusual diplomatic negotiation in Zaraxian history. The humans, despite their technological inferiority, negotiated as equals. They proposed a partnership predicated not on conquest, but on mutual defense, scientific exchange, and cultural understanding. "We don't want to be your perfect warrior race," their representative explained. "We want to be your partners in creating something better than either of us could achieve alone." The human response forced the High Council to reconsider not just our approach to Earth, but our entire expansionist policy. If humans, a species we had initially dismissed as unremarkable, could present such a formidable challenge, and then negotiate from an ethical, rather than purely strategic position, what did that imply about our fundamental assumptions? "They've weaponized morality," complained Councillor Drex during our emergency session. "It's a tactical maneuver to improve their negotiating position." "I disagree," countered Traz. "My assessment indicates genuine conviction. They believe cooperation is superior to dominance as a long-term strategy." "Based on what evidence?" demanded Drex. "Their own evolutionary history," Traz replied. "Despite their remarkable individual capabilities, humans achieved planetary dominance primarily through cooperation, innovation, and adaptation, not through physical superiority. Their most successful societies are those with the strongest cooperative frameworks." The debate continued for days, with the Council deeply divided. Finally, Council Leader Vrax called for my assessment. "High Commander Velik, you have studied these humans more extensively than any Zaraxian. What is your recommendation?" I considered carefully before responding. "The humans present us with a unique opportunity, not merely as potential allies, but as a catalyst for our own evolution as a species. For 10,000 cycles, the Zaraxian Dominion has expanded through conquest. We have incorporated the useful and discarded the rest. It has been effective, but not without cost." I displayed statistical analyses of our recent conquests, increasing resource requirements, rising resistance activities, diminishing returns on investment. Our traditional approach is showing signs of unsustainability. The humans offer an alternative model: partnership, mutual benefit, shared advancement. It is unfamiliar to us, even uncomfortable, but our own data suggests it may be more efficient in the long term. I paused, aware that my next words might be considered treasonous under traditional Zaraxian doctrine. "I recommend we accept the human proposal for partnership rather than dominance, not because we must, but because it represents a potentially superior strategic approach for our long-term objectives." The council chamber filled with the clicking sounds of intense debate. Eventually, Vrax raised his primary limbs for silence. "This decision requires more than strategic calculation," he said. "It requires us to reconsider what it means to be Zaraxian. For 1,000 cycles, we have defined ourselves as conquerors. The humans ask us to consider becoming partners instead. He turned his compound eyes toward me. High Commander Velik, you are authorized to pursue partnership negotiations with the humans, according to their proposed framework. The Council will re-evaluate based on outcomes. It was not full endorsement, but it was enough to proceed. The partnership with humans developed slowly at first, then with increasing momentum. We began with scientific exchange, sharing technological knowledge, in return for their insights on adaptation, psychological resilience, and creative problem-solving. What emerged surprised even our most optimistic analysts. The combination of Zaraxian technological precision with human adaptability produced innovations neither species would have developed alone. Our rigid hierarchical approach to problem-solving was complemented by their flexible, collaborative methods. They think differently, Milax observed as we watched a mixed human-Zaraxian research team tackle a complex engineering challenge. Where we see obstacles, they see opportunities. Where we apply force, they find workarounds.